This conference will now be recorded.
So we will continue with the treatment of varicosities. So coming to the surgical modalities of varicose veins. So before coming to the surgical modalities, as you know, first one for grade 1, grade 2 varicosities is the conservative management. So conservative management consists of the elastic grip bandage stockings which maintains the pressure of about 30 to 40 mm of mercury. Second one is the elevation of the limbs at the level of the heart. Second one is the graded compression bandages. So one of the important one is the Unna boot. So Unna is the name of a German dermatologist. So what is the specialty of the Unna boot? Can anyone? So Unna boot is a specialized 4-layer inelastic gauze bandage which consists of 4 layers and which is impregnated with the zinc oxide paste or glycerin or castor oil and calamine lotion. So this Unna boot we have to change the bandage in once in a week. So what is the you should kept in mind that is the before application of Unna boot there should not be any source of infection. So wound should be clean. So another important one is so what is the benefit of this Unna boot application? So first one is the which reduces the edema. So and improves the cutaneous circulation. That is the main use of the Unna boot. So another one regimen is the Bisgott regimen. What is the Bisgott regimen? So when will you apply the Bisgott regimen? So Bisgott regimen is nothing but the treatment for a ulcers. That is the venous stasis ulcers. So Bisgott regimen consists of a first one is the crepe bandage. Second one is the active and passive exercises and massage of the whole cough. Next one, another one thing which consists is the antibiotics according to the sensitive report. So Bisgott regimen it is the graded active passive exercises and massage. Then is the crepe bandage, antibiotics. So all these are the Bisgott regimen, especially when we will prescribe when we will apply in the venous stasis ulcers. So actually coming to the surgical modalities of varicose veins. So ligation and stripping of the whether involved vein, that is either great saphenous vein or the short saphenous vein. Next one is the ligation of the incomplete perforators. There are so many methods where we ligate the incompetent perforators. First one is the open subfacial ligation of perforators. Another one is the endoscopic ligation of perforators. Next one is the extrafacial ligation of the perforators. These are the surgical modalities. Where is the sclerotherapy? Another variant of sclerotherapy is the foam sclerotherapy. Another one is the endovenous laser ablation and radiofrequency ablations. So what are the indications for ligation and stripping of the varicose vein? The surgery is called as Trendelenburg surgery. So indication of the whether long saphenous vein or the short saphenous vein incompetency or perforating vein incompetency. So contraindications are the deep vein thrombosis. So where here we have to keep in mind that is the DVT, deep vein thrombosis. It is the both risk factor as well as complication of varicosities and also contraindication for open surgeries. and pregnancy and thrombophlebitis and any peripheral vascular diseases. So what is the important? So because we cannot make it on table, so we have to pre-plan this pre-op marking of varicose veins by Doppler. So as the varicose vein disappear when patient lies down on operating table, so it is essential to mark the course of the major superficial tortuous vein to be removed and what are the number of perforator incompetence and its location. So what is the steps of this is the main surgery we will doing for the varicose vein. So for your practicals and viva they will ask the steps of surgery. So after anesthesia, that is probably spinal anesthesia, proper position is given, that is whole table is tilted head down to an angle of about 10 degrees. This is called as Trendelenburg position. So what are the major incisions? There are two types of incisions we will give for Trendelenburg operation. One is the hockey stick incision, another one is the oblique incision. So incision is kept at groin and saphenous opening, that is approximately 3 to 4 centimeters below and lateral to the pubic tubercle. There is the anatomical position of the saphenous opening. So after division of the deep layer of fascia, saphenofemoral junction is exposed. So by the side, it is a diagram is showing the all tributaries of the great saphenous vein at the saphenofemoral junction. That is the saphenous opening. So what is the technique called? It is called as flush ligation of the great saphenous vein at the saphenofemoral junction. So that is a flush saphenofemoral ligation and transfixation done with ligation of all the main tributaries of the long saphenous vein. So then actually there is no differentiation between Trendelenburg operation with stripping or without stripping. In both cases, the common complication is the common is adverse effect is a recurrence. Recurrence is the more common in case of varicosities. So the stripper is passed down the saphenous vein and directed downwards by the finger. So first you have to identify the saphenofemoral junction, then there we have to ligate all the tributaries of the great saphenous vein, that is the major superficial epigastric and superficial circumflex, superficial pudendal and external pudendal. All these should be ligated. Then there are other non-important tributaries also present in from the great saphenous vein, but you should remember we should ligate the all these four before going to stripping the vein. So what I'm saying is the older technique, but nowadays stripper is delivered through small incisions over the ankle on medial aspect. But nowadays what we are doing is we are delivering the stripper just below the knee joint. We will give a incision just below the knee joint and we will deliver the stripper through a small incision. Then we should ligate the first distal end of the great saphenous vein and then the proximal end of the great saphenous vein. Then we have to change the knob of the stripper. Then again from upwards we have to pull along the vein the stripper. That is the procedure nowadays what we are doing. But previously they used to do stripping from the ankle, but there is a more chance of injury to the saphenous now, so that we're doing only below the level of the knee joint. So then we can have a question that then how we can remove the dilated great saphenous vein if at all present below the level of the knee joint. Then there will do the multiple hook phlebectomies. So that is the small stab incisions we will separate the fascia, identify the great saphenous vein. We will pick up the vein through a hook. Then we will ligate the both distal and proximal ends of the vein and we will cut the vein. That is the hook phlebectomies. So like that we will completely remove the great saphenous vein. So this is the diagram showing the stripper along with the everted and avulsed great saphenous vein. So vein is tied with stripper and the stripper is slowly and steadily pulled out through lower vein. So one thing you should keep in mind is, so during stripping of the vein, one assistant should keep the constant pressure over the course of the great saphenous vein in order to prevent the hematoma. So the vein bolus is withdrawn slowly from the lower end. So the residual veins are then warmed out using the multiple stab avulsions using the vein hooks from the preoperative marking sites. So postoperatively, limb elevation and compression stockings are compulsory. So what are the steps of surgery of the short saphenous vein? So after anesthesia, proper position is given. The patient must be face down. Knee is flexed a little by placing a sandbag under the ankle. Some prefer lateral leg position also. So the foot of the table is tilted up a little so that the legs are above the heart. So this is the position. So where we'll identify the saphenopopliteal junction. So incision is kept at least 5 centimeters long transversely across the popliteal fossa. So all this position is to make the popliteal fossa into the view. So in one of the transverse line of the skin above the level with the knee joint. So the incision is deepened until the deep fascia and short saphenous vein lies deep to this. So the fascia is divided transversely in the line of incision. The short saphenous vein is then seen between the two heads of the gastrocnemius. So as soon as the short saphenous vein is identified, it is lifted up in a pair of artery forceps and the knee is flexed still further. So then flush saphenopopliteal ligation along with the transfixation done with ligation of all the side branches of the short saphenous vein up to its junction with the popliteal vein. Then stripper is passed down distally directed by the finger and delivered to the point below the external malleolus through a small transverse incision. So in short saphenous vein surgery, there is a more chances of injury to the sural nerve. This is coming to the intraoperative complications of the surgery. First, any surgery, first one is a bleeding. Bleeding from a torn saphenopharynx. What is saphenopharynx? It is a dilated, huge dilatation of the great saphenous vein and emptying into the femoral vein. That is a saphenofemoral junction. So that part of the vein is dilated. That is the saphenopharynx. So bleeding can occur from a torn saphenopharynx or injury to the common femoral vein or injury to the common femoral artery. So all these injuries occur because after incision, after identification of the great saphenous vein, you should skeletonize the great saphenous vein up to saphenofemoral junction. So there is a chances to injury of all these vessels. So injury to the saphenous nerve and injury to the sural nerve. So immediate post-op care. This is important in case of varicose veins because maintenance of firm elastic pressure over whole limb and regular movement and exercise of the legs should be done. Then elevation of the foot end of the bed, that is 6 to 9 inches, so that the legs are just above the heart level when the patient is in bed. So all these are in order to prevent the deep vein thrombosis. And foot of the bed is raised to 6 to 9 inches and patient is not allowed more than 2 pillows. And the original foam crepe bandage put on at the operation should remain untouched for 7 days. So patient can mobilize after 24 hours after the surgery. When the foot is placed on the ground for the first time, extra foam webbing elastic bandage should be placed over the knee and the joint, support ankle joints. And at 7th day of post-op, stitches can be removed. Say foam webbing elastic bandage from ankle to knee is worn throughout the day for a whole fortnight, that is 3 to 4 weeks. And we should ask the patient for follow-up. And before discharging the patient, you should do the again Doppler, venous Doppler, to see the whether all the incompetent perforators are ligated or not, or any hematoma formation. All this can be seen in the venous Doppler. So post-operative complications. So hematoma and the bruising. So normally bruising absorbed within the 3 to 4 weeks. So small hematomas can reabsorb by its own, whereas large hematomas more than 4 centimeters can be evacuated with sterile precaution under local anesthesia. So second most common post-operative complication is the lymphedema. So lymphedema generally occurs on 5th to 6th post-op day, so which get absorbed within 1 to 2 weeks. So it should not be intervened as may lead to lymphatic fistula formation. So then second is the suture line infection or wound sepsis, post-operative nephroneuritis, and lymphedema of the leg due to damage to the lymphatics, and induration of the stripper tract, and DVT and embolism. So usually what you are doing is the subfacial ligation of the perforators, but there is a one term called as extrafacial ligation of the perforators, that is called as Cockett's procedure, but it is not commonly done nowadays because main aim of extrafacial ligation of perforators is to clear all the extrafacial veins, but it is more traumatic when compared to the subfacial due to adherence of the subcutaneous fat and connective tissue to the fascia. So another open technique of subfacial perforator incompetence is called as Linton's technique. So nowadays what we are doing is the Linton's technique. So what is the subfacial? So we have to give the small incisions of 1 to 3 centimeters over the preoperative marked areas, marked perforator incompetence region. Then we have to open the fascia, that is a deep fascia. Then we have to see the perforating veins traversing from superficial vein, great stiffness vein to the deep vein. So that T junction should be identified, and we have to ligate the both distal end of the perforator and the proximal end of the perforator, and ultimately we will ligate and cut the perforator which is incompetent and connecting the great stiffness vein and the deep femoral vein. So that is the Linton's technique. So nowadays endoscopic perforator surgery is gaining importance. So that is a subfacial endoscopic perforator surgery. So what are the indications where you will do the endoscopic perforator surgery? So people who suffer with the leg ulcers due to incompetent venous perforators without saphenofemoral incompetence. So these are the those patients are the indicated for endoscopic perforator surgery. So incompetent perforator veins in cough with no superficial venous reflex or any evidence of DVT on Doppler, and patient with long saphenous vein or short saphenous vein varicosities with ulcer. So what is the procedure? So using spinal or general anesthesia, a 3/4 inch incision is made on the inside of the cuff. So an instrument is inserted deep to the fascia of the leg and a large balloon is inflated with water to create a working potential space. So the balloon is then emptied and the space is insufflated with the carbon dioxide or air. So the camera is inserted and the perforator veins can seen in the space passing from the superficial to the deep layers. So this is the diagram. So this is the superficial vein, this is the ulcer, this is the deep vein, and intervening the perforator veins are present. So we will endoscopically through the instrument we will remove all the perforating veins. So another small incision is made in the cuff or for passage of another instrument. The perforator veins are carefully dissected. Clips are applied and the veins are divided if necessary. So all trocars are then removed and the wounds are closed. So the small incisions are mainly for the trocars. The patient is generally sent home the same day of the surgery with the elastic stocking. This is the outpatient procedure. So these are the surgical modalities, and other methods are there is a foam sclerotherapy, laser and radio frequency ablation method. These are the ablations of the venous lumen. So what is foam sclerotherapy? So by injecting sclerosant into a varicose vein, destroy its endothelium in the area and thus induce an aseptic inflammation and thrombosis, which organizes and closes the vein. That is the principle of the involved in this sclerotherapy. So what is foam sclerotherapy? So foams is created. So first let us discuss about indications. So residual vein after open surgeries, then large venous telangiectasis and isolated small dilated veins. These are the indications. So what are the contraindications? Contraindications are the first one is the pregnancy, any pelvic tumor, any superficial thrombophlebitis at the time of procedure, or DVT or previous history of reaction to the sclerosant. So what are the different sclerosants used in the sclerotherapy? There is a sodium tetradecyl sulfate, sodium muriate. Second one is a hypertonic saline solution, polydocanol sotradigol, and ethanolamine oleate and glucose combinations. So what is the foam sclerotherapy? So depending upon the size of the vein to be occluded, sclerosant is taken in 20 ml syringe and connected to another syringe with 4 times the amount of air. That is sclerosant and air in ratio of 1:4. So repeatedly we have to change the sclerosant in a syringe into a air syringe. So we have to repeat the procedure until a thick by repeated to and fro motion of the solution and air into the syringes, dense white foam is prepared. So after giving position under ultrasound, USG guidance, needle is inserted into the vein and sclerosant is injected into the vein. Not more than 20 ml foam should be injected at one sitting, and multiple sittings may be required for successful obliteration of the vein. The foam being dense, it does not run away up the vein. It requires the massaging the skin over varicose vein. So immediately after foam injection, compression stocking is applied and patient is mobilized. So patient can go home on the same day of the procedure. Again, it is also a outpatient procedure. And after 48 hours of procedure, again ultrasound is done to rule out the DVT. So what are the advantages and disadvantages? So coming to the advantages, it is cheap and easy to learn and truly an OPD procedure. It can be repeated many times. No anesthesia. Main thing is no anesthesia is required, and patient can be sent on the same day. What is the disadvantage? Not suitable for any SFJ or SPJ obliteration or any reflex. Second one is the thrombophlebitis and pigmentation over the skin. That is the complication of the varicosities. Then more than 3 weeks compression is required. And multiple times can be, so the procedure should be repeated so many times to occlude the vein. So all these are the complications of the sclerotherapy. One is the itching, hyperpigmentation, telangiectatic matting, pain, bruising, and minor allergic reactions, ulcerations at the injection site, and anaphylaxis. And pulmonary embolism are the DVT. Although its incidence is very extremely low, but they can occur. So coming to the endovenous laser treatment. So what is the principle involved in endovenous laser ablation? So that is the it initiates the non-thrombotic occlusion by direct thermal injury to the vein wall, causing the main motive is the destruction of the endothelial wall. So causing the endothelial denudation and collagen contraction, and later ultimately leads into fibrosis. So what are the indications? So long saphenous vein varicosities or short saphenous vein varicosities. And contraindication is same, superficial vein thrombophlebitis and DVT. So what is the procedure? It is done under local anesthesia under ultrasonographic guidance. So varicose vein is first marked preoperatively, then supine position is given, then vein is cannulated with 0.035 J-shaped guide wire via 19G needle. Whereas in sclerotherapy, we will use the 23 gauge needle. So the laser fiber is then introduced over it under ultrasonographic guidance up to 2 to 3 centimeters distal to the saphenofemoral junction. So first catheter is introduced, then vein warms and collapses, then catheter withdrawn, closing the vein. This is the technique. So fiber is withdrawn at the rate of 1 to 3 mm per second under ultrasonographic guidance. So this laser fiber causes the thermal damage to the venous endothelium. So that at the rate of 1000 centigrade and occlusion of lumen by fibrosis. So immediately after procedure, compression stockings are given and patient can be discharged on the same day with good analgesics and with compressive stockings. So what is the advantage? It is a minimal invasive procedure, no post-op scar, and done with local anesthesia, and minimal post-op pain will be there when compared to the open surgical techniques. So recurrence rate is 2 years. Percentage involved is the 3%. There will be a recurrence rate of 3% at 2 years follow-up of time of the surgery. So what is the disadvantage? It is a costly procedure, high technical skills required, and color Doppler and radiologist also required. So one disadvantage is, as it is a laser, it causes the skin burns and it causes the thrombophlebitis and paresthesias. So next one is the radio frequency ablation. So technique is the same. So the technique based on the same principle, but here instead of laser fiber, special heater probe will be there. Probe is inserted which works at 85 to 120 degrees centigrade. So probe directly comes in contact with the vein wall and causes the tissue damage. So a 45 centimeters of vein segment takes only 3 to 5 minutes of time. So patient can directly go to the home after the procedure. So another technique is the Trivex. So it is an alternative to the aversion phlebectomy for superficial vein excision. In this technique, with the help of transcutaneous light, the veins are seen and extracted with the help of the suction dissector. It is a trans-illuminated procedure. So let us discuss about the different triangles of the neck. So this is the main sternocleidomastoid muscle which divides the neck into anterior triangle and the posterior triangle. Inferior border is the clavicle and here is the trapezius muscle. So the neck is arbitrarily subdivided into two triangles by the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So one is the anterior triangle, another one is the posterior triangle. So an anterior triangle consists of submental triangle, submandibular triangle, muscular and visceral triangle, and the carotid triangle. Whereas the posterior triangle is the occipital supraclavicular, that is homoclavicular triangle. So this is the diagram showing the triangles within the anterior triangle of the neck. So coming to the submandibular triangle. So submandibular triangle, what is the boundaries? So above it is bounded by the mastoid and the mandible, whereas anteriorly anterior belly of the digastric muscle, and posterior belly of digastric and posteriorly stylohyoid. So what are the contents of the triangle? Main content is the facial artery, lingual nerve and the submandibular ganglion, submandibular duct, lingual artery and the hypoglossal nerve. So all these are the main contents of the submandibular triangle. So the lingual nerve and submandibular duct passes through a gap between the hypoglossal and the mylohyoid muscles. So the lingual artery passes deep to the hyoglossus muscle. So the diagram is showing the submental triangle, which is located between the two anterior digastric muscles. And structures involved are the only submental lymph nodes which drains the floor of the mouth. So submental lymph nodes, these are the level 1A. So coming to the carotid triangle. So what are the boundaries of the carotid triangle? So posterior belly of digastric muscle form digastric muscle and superior belly of the omohyoid muscle and anterior border of the sternomastoid muscle. So what is the roof of the carotid triangle? The first layer under the skin and superficial fascia includes the platysma, which forms the roof of the carotid triangle. So what are the veins of the carotid triangle? So with the roof, when you remove the roof, here are the boundaries of the carotid triangle and the superficial veins related to it. That is the main one is a common facial vein. Other structures are the retromandibular vein, posterior auricular vein, facial vein, and external jugular vein and anterior jugular vein. So what are the nerves within the carotid triangle? So the nerves that enter the carotid triangle and that lie superficial to the internal jugular vein, internal and external carotid arteries. So what are the nerves? First one is the hypoglossal nerve. Second one is the C1 root of ansa cervicalis and C1 fibers running with hypoglossal nerve, that is now to the thyrohyoid muscle. C2, C3 root of ansa cervicalis and ansa cervicalis. Because carotid triangle, all these are important in doing the neck dissections. So later we'll discuss about the neck dissections also. What are the different types of neck dissections? What are the limitations of the neck dissections? So reflection of the sternocleidomastoid and removal of the common facial nerve, what will come across? Will come across the common carotid and external carotid along with its superficial thyroid artery, occipital artery, lingual artery, facial artery, and internal carotid artery. So all these are the arteries in the carotid triangle: facial, lingual, occipital, internal, along external carotid, along with the superior thyroid artery and common carotid. So floor of the carotid triangle. So floor is the deepest aspect of the carotid triangle. So the muscles at this level are the middle lower pharyngeal constrictors. So the structures seen passing through this level are the superior laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of the vagus along with its two terminal branches. So internal laryngeal, which supplies the sensitive to the upper part of the larynx, and external laryngeal, which supplies motor branch to the cricoid muscle. So coming to the muscular or visceral triangle. So the muscular triangle has the following boundaries. So midline of the neck, second one superior belly of omohyoid and the sternomastoid. So the muscles forming and within the triangle are called as strap muscles. So superficial layer is consists of the sternohyoid and the superior belly of omohyoid. Deep layer consists of thyroid and sternothyroid. So this is the posterior. So posterior triangle of the neck. So what is the importance of posterior triangle of the neck? So tuberculosis, cervical lymphadenitis. It is most common in posterior triangle of the neck. So what are the boundaries? So anteriorly, posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid and posteriorly anterior border of trapezius. And base is formed by the middle one-third of the leg, whereas apex is meeting of the both trapezius and the sternomastoid. So here is clearly saying that is the sternomastoid muscle, which is clearly divides the anterior and posterior triangles of the neck. So roof of the posterior triangle, it is formed by the skin superficial fascia consists of the platysma muscle, cutaneous branches of the cervical plexus, external jugular vein, and investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. All these will form the roof. So coming to the floor, first from below upward, scalenus medius, levator scapulae, splenius capitis, and semispinalis capitis. So the muscles of the floor are covered by the prevertebral layer of the deep cervical fascia. So what are the contents of the posterior triangle? So nerves, arteries, veins, and the muscles. So coming to the nerves, the main contents are the nerves in posterior triangle of the neck. So the three trunks of the brachial plexus will be seen, and four cutaneous branches of the cervical plexus, that is a lesser occipital, great auricular, transverse cervical, supraclavicular nerves, and spinal accessory nerve. This is a cranial nerve. So three trunks of the brachial plexus and four cutaneous, 3, 4, and 1 cranial nerve, that is the spinal accessory. So what are the arteries? Third part of subclavian artery and suprascapular artery and transverse cervical artery and occipital artery. Veins are the following the same arteries, that is subclavian vein and the external jugular vein. And muscle, the only muscle in the content muscle in the posterior triangle is the inferior belly of the omohyoid muscle. So these are the boundaries of the posterior and contents of the posterior triangle. So what is the importance of the triangles of the neck? So you should know the DDs of the lumps in the different triangles of the neck. So first we will look into the lumps in the anterior triangle of the neck. So most common are the lymphadenopathies. Second one is the salivary gland pathology, whether it may be due to stone, tumor or infection. Next is the branchial cyst. Next one is the laryngocele. Next one is the parotid gland swelling. Next one is the carotid body tumor or the carotid aneurysm. So lumps in the posterior triangle, that is the lymphadenopathy, that is most commonly tuberculous lymphadenopathy, and cervical rib or first cervical rib. Next one is the pharyngeal pouch. Next one is the cystic hygroma, usually on the left side. So coming to the cervical lymph nodes. So totally lymph node of head and neck is divided into horizontal group and the vertical group. Horizontal group is the submental lymph nodes, submandibular lymph nodes, parotid lymph nodes, preauricular and the occipital lymph nodes. Whereas vertical is again divided into central and lateral. Whereas central consists of the prelaryngeal, pretracheal and the paratracheal lymph nodes. Whereas lateral is the jugulo-digastric and the jugulo-omohyoid lymph nodes. This is a one type of classification. So this is the diagrammatic representation of the head and neck lymph nodes. So here so this is not clear picture, but I want to show you the just one representation. So first one is the jugulo-omohyoid nodes. This is the one. Here it is the one. This is a jugulo-omohyoid nodes, and second one is the deep cervical nodes. These are the submandibular nodes. Four is the jugulo-digastric nodes here. Then superficial cervical nodes, occipital nodes, retroauricular and parotid nodes, buccal nodes, submental nodes, and anterior cervical nodes and the tracheal nodes. So coming to the level of lymph nodes. So what are the levels of lymph node? There are 7 levels of lymph nodes. Level 1 is the submandibular. Level 1 is again divided into A and B. A is the submental, B is the submandibular, and level 2 is the upper jugular. Level 3 is the middle jugular, and level 4 is the lower jugular. Level 5 is the posterior triangle lymph nodes. Level 6 is the central compartment. So level 7 is the superior mediastinal lymph node. So central compartments consists of the pre-laryngeal and the pretracheal lymph nodes. So the American Joint Commission on Cancer staging system for head and neck cancer. This is subdivided into 6 levels of lymph nodes into 6 sub-levels. So first level 1 consists of the submandibular and the submental, whereas subdivided into A is submental and B is submandibular, whereas submental within anterior belly of the digastric and the higher, these are the boundaries. Whereas submandibular lymph nodes within anterior belly, posterior belly of digastric and the mandible. So again level 2 is our upper jugular, again divided into 2A and 2B. So lymph nodes present along the upper 1/3 of the internal jugular vein and the spinal accessory nerve. These are the upper jugular nerves. So 2A is lymph node present anterior to the spinal accessory nerve, whereas 2B is posterior to the spinal. So level 2 is divided into A and B by the spinal accessory nerve. So coming to the level 3, that is the middle jugular lymph nodes. So lymph nodes located around middle 1/3 of the internal jugular vein is the middle jugular lymph nodes. So the boundaries from inferior border of hyoid bone is above and inferior border of cricoid cartilage is below, and between the sternohyoid anteriorly and the sternomastoid muscle posterior border. These are the boundaries of the level 3 lymph nodes. That is, above is the inferior border of the hyoid, below is the cricoid cartilage, whereas anteriorly by the sternohyoid and posteriorly by the posterior border of the sternomastoid muscle. So coming to the level 4 is the lower jugular lymph nodes. That is the lymph nodes located around the lower 1/3 of the internal jugular vein. So level 5, which includes the posterior triangle lymph nodes. So lymph nodes located along the lower half of the spinal accessory nerve and the transverse cervical artery. So which is again subdivided into 5A and 5B. So here we are saying that is 5A and 5B. So this is the which is posterior triangle is divided into 5A and 5B by the omohyoid muscle. So coming to the level 6, that is the central compartment lymph node. So lymph nodes in this compartment consists of the pretracheal, paratracheal, prelaryngeal, perithyroidal and precricoidal. All these includes under the central compartment lymph nodes. So what are the boundaries? It present between hyoid bone above and the suprasternal notch below and laterally between the two common carotid arteries. These are the boundaries of the level 6, that is the central compartment. So coming to the lymphatic drainage of the head and neck regions. So first from the scalp and ears, that is, which drains into the submandibular nodes, superficial parotid nodes and occipital node. So face is drained by the superficial and deep parotid node, submandibular and the submental node. And nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is drained by the deep cervical node, submandibular, retropharyngeal and subarachnoid space. So pellet by retropharyngeal lymph nodes and the deep cervical lymph nodes. Whereas flora of the mouth by the submandibular node, submental node and the deep cervical node. Whereas tonsil by the jugulo-digastric and the upper deep cervical lymph nodes. So lymphatic drainage of the tongue. So tongue may be divided into the part behind the velvet papilla and part in front of the central area. So part in front of the central area, that is central part and the tip and marginal area. So tip of tongue drains into the submental nodes, whereas anterior 2/3 and the lateral margins drains into the submandibular node, whereas posterior 1/3 of the tongue drains into the jugulo-digastric nodes. So what is the important in this? Ultimately, all these drains into the jugulo-omohyoid nodes. So tip is by submental, whereas anterior 2/3 and lateral margins by submandibular and posterior 1/3 by jugulo-digastric. All these ultimately drain into the jugulo-omohyoid nodes. So drainage of the neck. So it is drained into deep cervical lymph nodes and into infrahyoid, prelaryngeal and pretracheal lymph nodes. So lymphatic drainage of the neck. So it is divided as above the vocal cords and the below the vocal fold. So above the vocal fold, it reaches the deep upper cervical nodes, whereas the below vocal folds drains into the pre-laryngeal and the pre-tracheal lymph nodes. So this is the diagram showing the lymphatic drainage of the head and neck. So here ends the class. In further class, we'll discuss about the what are the different types of neck dissections and what are the boundaries of the neck dissections and all those things. Thank you.